Get rolling. So welcome again. I'm Melissa Valiant. I'm the Communications Director at Beyond Plastics. Happy to have you all on this virtual news conference this morning. On March 18th, Beyond Plastics, Earthjustice, and Toxic Free Future submitted comments to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency regarding its consideration to designate vinyl chloride as a high priority substance under the Toxic Substances Control Act. The comments included a new report titled Toxic Substances Control Act Technical Report, Exposure to Vinyl Chloride, which was developed by Material Research L3C for Earthjustice and Beyond Plastics. Today, we'll be hearing from several experts on this news before we open the floor to questions from the media. Our technical expert, Jim Vallette, as well as Mike Shade from Toxic Free Future, will also be available for the Q&A portion of the call. Any follow-up questions can be directed to me. I will drop my email and phone number in the chat. But before that, I would like to introduce Judith Enck. Judith is the founder and president of Beyond Plastics and is a professor at Bennington College in Vermont. Prior to these roles, she was appointed by President Obama to serve as EPA Regional Administrator for EPA Region 2. She previously served as Deputy Secretary for the Environment in the New York State Governor's Office. Judith?
Thanks, Melissa, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As mentioned, we're here today to discuss vinyl chloride and the comments that we submitted to the EPA on March 18th regarding EPA's new assessment of this toxic chemical, which they recently announced. EPA is doing this under their authorities of the federal law, Toxic Substance Control Act, TSCA, and it could lead the agency to designating vinyl chloride as a high priority chemical. If that happens, EPA will then start a tedious multi-year regulatory process that could lead to either banning or restricting the sale and importation of vinyl chloride in the United States. Beyond Plastics calls on the EPA to ban vinyl chloride. EPA will make this decision on whether or not to make this designation at the end of the year, this year in December. It's critical that this process starts now so it doesn't become a decades-long process the way asbestos did. You saw that in the news last week, and I'll come back to it. I made sure to have this rubber ducky with me today because this iconic children's toy is made, like so many consumer goods, from PVC plastic. Most vinyl chloride is used to make PVC plastic. Most of us touch this material every day, whether it's in your shower curtain, product packaging, credit cards, or toys like this that our children chew on in the bathtub, and also pets' toys that dogs and other pets chew on. PVC is even in drinking water pipes. Beyond Plastics issued a report on the perils of PVC pipes for drinking water last year, which is on our website, beyondplastics.org. So what's the problem? Vinyl chloride was designated a human carcinogen in 1974. What else was going on in 1974? This was the year that Richard Nixon resigned as president. Blazing Saddles was the top grossing movie. And Barbara Streisand, whose new book you should read, her song, The Way We Were, was the #1 hit single. That's how long ago it was 50 years ago. For the past 50 years, federal and state regulators have clearly known that vinyl chloride is a carcinogen, yet they did very little to protect us. When vinyl chloride received the designation by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, when the cancer designation was made, the one agency that acted was the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and they banned vinyl chloride from cosmetic aerosol products, liquor bottles, and air propellants like hairspray. Remember hairspray? which really makes you wonder if this chemical is toxic enough to ban it from hairspray. Why is it still being used to make rubber duckies that our children chew on in the bathtub? As a carcinogen, no level of exposure to vinyl chloride is considered being safe or without risk. This chemical is one of the most studied carcinogens in the occupational setting. It's not just suspected of causing cancer. The International Agency for Research on Cancer considers it a group 1 carcinogen. It's known to contribute to liver cancer, and it's associated with lymphoma, leukemia, and cancers of the brain and lungs. Pregnant women may have an increased risk of miscarriage and birth defects when exposed to high levels of vinyl chloride in the air. High exposure to vinyl chloride may lead to headaches, dizziness, and difficulty breathing, and severe exposure can be fatal. It's known to leach out of PVC plastic products like pipes that bring us drinking water. And both Beyond Plastics and Toxic Free Future have done reports on this topic, which Melissa can drop in the chat. And when you think about PVC plastic pipes, they sometimes burn during building fires. And it's not surprising to learn that on average, almost 2 out of 3 firefighters who die in the line of duty die of cancer. We all know brave firefighters. They are brave public servants. And historically, the leading cause of death in that occupation was heart attacks. And sadly, now it's cancer. Our wonderful colleague, Diane Wilson, will speak more about this, but the production of vinyl chloride specifically hurts low-income communities and communities of color in Texas, Louisiana, and Kentucky, where facilities that produce vinyl chloride are located, mostly in environmental justice community. A recent Toxic Free Future report revealed that within a 3-mile radius of these plants, 63% of local residents are people of color, and residents who earn an average of $23,474 per capita, which is 37% below the national average. These facilities are not sited in Scarsdale or Beverly Hills. They're always sited in low-income communities or communities of color. Additionally, these communities and others are along train routes and that are at risk of derailment. The real danger of transporting vinyl chloride on our country's rickety rail system came into clear focus last February, a year ago February, when train cars derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. And Jess Conard will speak more about that in a bit. Unless lawmakers adopt new plastic reduction laws, plastic production is on track to double over the next 20 years. The last thing we should be doing is moving more toxic chemicals through people's backyards. Why risk so much for a product that can be replaced with safer alternatives? If the EPA follows through with the TSCA process for vinyl chloride, it could signal the end of vinyl chloride's use in U.S. products. This would not be unprecedented. Phthalates, a common chemical in PVC plastic, have been restricted from children's toys in the U.S. and the European Union and many nations around the world. Some companies in the U.S. have already taken steps to avoid PVC plastic. In January of 2022, the U.S. Plastics Pact, a group endorsed by 100 major consumer brand companies, including Walmart, Target, Unilever, Keurig, Dr. Pepper, General Mills, and more, they made a voluntary commitment to stop using PVC in plastic packaging by 2025. But obviously, voluntary commitments are not enough. And if you read the news last week, you may know that EPA finally banned the most common form of asbestos last Monday, March 18th. This too is a cancer-causing substance that's linked to the death of tens of thousands of Americans. It took 35 years for the EPA to ban asbestos. The agency, my former agency, tried to do that under TSCA back in 1989, but they were thwarted following significant opposition from companies using asbestos. Let's make sure vinyl chloride does not follow the same tedious, slow pace. It's been half a century since the federal government designated vinyl chloride as a carcinogen. Half a century. The lack of action is shameful, it's irresponsible, and we need change. It is past time for EPA Administrator Michael Regan to use his existing authority under federal law to ban vinyl chloride. That's why we've prioritized making a comprehensive submission to the EPA, and we will stay on this. We are sharing the truth behind vinyl chloride to ensure that EPA is reviewing the well-documented evidence of people's exposures to this carcinogenic chemical. It's critical that the agency start the process of banning vinyl chloride this year. We cannot wait another 50 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. I'd like to introduce Eve Gartner. Eve is the Director of Cross-Cutting Toxic Strategies at Earthjustice. Eve works with groups around the country to develop state policies that will reduce exposures to chemicals and pesticides. Eve is going to walk you through the report that we submitted in our comments to the EPA. Over to you, Eve.
Great. Thanks so much, Melissa. I want to give you a quick overview of the TSCA process that's just getting underway, and then, as Melissa said, share a few highlights from Material Research's Vinyl Chloride Exposure Report. So as Judith shared, EPA has initiated the process of designating vinyl chloride as a high priority substance under TSCA. There's little doubt that at the end of this process, vinyl chloride will be designated as high priority. And although this should be the simplest of decisions, the law actually requires EPA to spend at least 9 months making this decision, but no more than 12 months. So after that designation is final, which should happen by the end of this calendar year, EPA will conduct a comprehensive risk evaluation. This involves the EPA quantifying the risks that are posed by vinyl chloride from cradle to grave, from the manufacturing of vinyl chloride to the processing of it into PVC plastic, to distributing it by rail and vessel, to the use of this chemical and the products containing it, and to disposal. And this has to take into account all exposures in industrial settings, from building materials and pipes and consumer products, from drinking water, as well as from the air and vapor intrusion of vinyl chloride into people's homes from groundwater, and everything else that I might have missed. EPA is required to specially consider risks to populations that are likely to be exposed or harmed more than the general population. And this would certainly include workers, fence line communities, which, as Judith explained, are disproportionately people of color and low-income people, and children who are more at risk of harm from exposure to toxic chemicals and carcinogens in particular. And taking all of that into account, EPA must decide if vinyl chloride presents unreasonable risk. And it must do that without considering how expensive it would be or how difficult it would be to ban vinyl chloride. And it's notable that all of the chemicals that have gone through this TSCA process since the law went through a major overhaul in 2016 have been found to present unreasonable risk. And that was also true in the Trump administration as well as the Biden administration. So every chemical to go through this process so far has been found to present unreasonable risk. So once EPA finds that vinyl chloride presents unreasonable risk, and I'm just going to assume that will be the result here because it's so likely that will happen, then EPA will have to adopt a risk management rule to eliminate the unreasonable risks that it identified. And that risk management rule may require a full ban or a partial ban or a variety of other types of risk management mechanisms, including a combination of different things, like it could ban certain uses in certain products, and then restrictions on releases of chemicals into the air and water, even beyond what is allowed by permits that are already in place under other laws. So this is going to be a multi-year process. And as Judith said, we are going to be kind of following EPA and telling, EPA what we think it's doing right and not right, and providing it with information throughout this process. So after EPA made its announcement that vinyl chloride is going through the TSCA process, it opened a comment period and said that it wanted all information that the public has about vinyl chloride. And because we want to make sure that EPA's risk evaluation doesn't overlook or understate real-world risk and exposure, Earthjustice and Beyond Plastic retained material research to investigate and do a report on all the ways that people may be exposed to this dangerous chemical. So I want to highlight a few key points from material research's report and our comment letter. So first, more than 18 billion pounds of vinyl chloride were manufactured in the US in 2021. This was a record high and almost triple the amount that was produced 50 years ago, when vinyl chloride was found to be a human carcinogen. So this increase is largely due to the dramatic rise in sales of PVC plastic and vinyl. The second key point is that the manufacture, processing, and distribution of vinyl chloride around the country and the world is resulting in a huge volume of toxic chemical releases into the environment and into communities. According to EPA's toxic release inventory, for the last 14 years, at least 500,000 pounds of vinyl chloride are released each year. That's 1,330 pounds per day. This is an incredibly large volume of a toxic gas that is a known human carcinogen at the 100 parts per million level. So the most polluting facility is the Calvert City, Kentucky facility. That facility routinely emits more than 100,000 pounds of vinyl chloride per year. EPA recently conducted fence line monitoring near that site, and based on the testing, it found that people in that community face greatly elevated cancer risks from vinyl chloride, and as well as a few other chemicals that are emitted from that vinyl chloride operation. Material research combed through incident reports submitted by vinyl chloride and PVC manufacturers and identified dozens of unplanned releases of vinyl chloride each year, resulting from spills, leaks, fugitive emissions, or other types of incidents. The volume of these unplanned releases is sometimes very high. In fact, an EPA engineer told residents near that Calvert City facility that most of the emissions from that vinyl chloride plant, and again, that's the most polluting plant in the country, come from what he called leaky pipes. And it's not at all clear that these leaky pipe emissions are ever being reported to EPA. So material research found that in the 13-year period between 2010 and 2023, at least 930 unplanned vinyl chloride release incidents occurred in the US. That's 1 every 5.3 days. In addition to that, since 1968, there have been at least 28 incidents in which vinyl chloride carrying rail tank cars derailed. That's a rate of 1 every other year. And so while those are not happening weekly, the potential for disaster when a rail car or an entire series of rail cars derails is staggering. A different report recently prepared by Material Research and Toxic Free Future estimated that at any given time, up to 36 million pounds of vinyl chloride is traveling on more than 200 rail cars across nearly 2,000 miles of US railways, and that's at any given moment. They estimated that more than 3 million people live within 1 mile of these train routes between Texas and New Jersey, including over 600,000 children in more than 1,500 schools. So again, a derailment in a heavily populated community or near a school could be devastating. Material research found a very disturbing fact about rail transit of vinyl chloride. They found that between 2010 and 2021, on 337 occasions, the Federal Railroad Administration approved vinyl chloride tank tank cars or tank cars containing vinyl chloride. They allowed those cars to proceed on their routes even though the trains did not conform with hazardous material regulations. And at least some of those nonconformities could impair safety. But again, the Federal Railroad Administration said, yes, go ahead and continue on your route. Material research also found that the US exports about 3 billion pounds of vinyl chloride each year, and the majority of that is transported by ship to Mexico and Colombia. The process of transferring vinyl chloride onto the vessels is fraught with risk because vinyl chloride is highly flammable and potentially explosive. Not surprisingly, there have been several incidents at the docks, which are detailed in this report. In one incident, 300 residents and 2,400 employees at the naval station in Corpus Christi had to be evacuated. So one of the big takeaways from this report is that manufacturing, processing, and transporting vinyl chloride is a very dangerous business. Based on the regular occurrence of incidents and disasters over the last few decades, it appears that the chemical industry cannot manufacture and distribute this flammable, explosive, carcinogenic gas without serious incident and potential catastrophe. So there's two other quick points I wanted to make from the material research report. First, vinyl chloride is still used extensively in consumer products. In some of these products, vinyl chloride is present at almost or at least a 25% concentration. That's a very significant amount of vinyl chloride in consumer products. And some of these products are children's products. The other key thing from the report about consumer products is that there's no mechanism for identifying all of the consumer products that contain vinyl chloride. So what we know and what's documented in the report could be just the tip of the iceberg. Our comments urge EPA to find out more about the presence of vinyl chloride in consumer products, including by requiring testing of products to determine whether they contain vinyl chloride and how much. And the final point I wanted to make from the material research report is about the likelihood that people are being exposed to vinyl chloride from drinking water that flows through PVC pipes. The crux of the issue is that no one knows, how much vinyl chloride leaches into our drinking water from PVC pipes. But we do know that there is some residual vinyl chloride present in PVC pipes. And we also know that as a matter of chemistry, residual vinyl chloride can leach into drinking water from PVC pipe. In particular, we know that during the recent wildfires in California, vinyl chloride and other dangerous chemicals leached from the PVC pipe that had been damaged by the fire into drinking water. And that was found in testing of the drinking water. Given the increasing prevalence of climate change related wildfires and the fact that these are occurring in parts of the country that are highly populated, this is a cause for serious concern. Our comments urgently ask EPA to do testing to determine the extent to which vinyl chloride is present in drinking water, both under regular routine conditions and high heat conditions, so that these exposures can be considered as part of the risk evaluation and eventually the decision about whether vinyl chloride should be banned or phased out. So that's just a snippet of what's in the report. I urge you to look at it carefully, and I will turn it back to Melissa.
Thanks, Eve. Next, I'm going to introduce Jess Conard. Jess Conard is a licensed speech-language pathologist who was launched into grassroots advocacy following the East Palestine, Ohio train derailment and chemical spill. She now serves as Beyond Plastics Appalachia Director, where she's working to stop plastic pollution in communities throughout the Appalachian region. Jess will discuss why it's so important that the disaster that happened in her backyard be a catalyst for nationwide change. Jess.
Thank you, Melissa. It is with deep gratitude that I'm here today, and it's really coming full circle. The last time I spoke at a press conference about vinyl chloride, I was on the lawn at the EPA headquarters in Washington, D.C. with Judith. And tonight we'll be celebrating that very moment at our local library here in East Palestine with some photos from Time Magazine. So it really has come full circle today. I am here today again as a faithful and steadfast representative of the strong community members of East Palestine, Ohio, and those living in the very important border towns of Pennsylvania. In February of 2023, a Norfolk Southern train derailment and an unnecessary vinyl chloride spill and burn released 1.1 million pounds of vinyl chloride into the homes and streets where we rode our bikes, hosted the annual street fair, volunteered for community acts of service, waded in the creeks to cool our summer feet, and walked our beloved pets. With fear and uncertainty shadowing our days, we continue to stand together amidst the echoes of a tragedy that tested our spirits. We endured the pain of loss, the anxiety for our health, and the betrayal by those we thought would protect us. The past year has reshaped our lives in ways we never imagined. We have seen the indifference of industry, yet more importantly, we have witnessed communities across the country reaching out their hands, united in our resolve to protect and support one another, united together to urge the EPA to ban vinyl chloride. We have cried, fought, and prayed as a family forged in the fire of adversity. I find my strength to be here with you today, again, because of an unbreakable bond of solidarity. There are so many of us who have faced the giants of industry and environmental injustice for decades. We must recognize that what happened here in East Palestine, Ohio, is not an isolated incident, but a symptom of a global crisis. And we cannot let this crisis go to waste. I know the people of East Palestine, Ohio, will move forward and onward with perseverance until our community is healed. But that's not enough. It's not enough until every community threatened by the environmental injustice of vinyl chloride is recognized, respected, and restored. This movement to ban vinyl chloride is the direct result of the petrochemical industry's toxic pollution. It has been born out of the resilience these communities were forced to discover and out of unwavering support that we have found in each other. It is now time for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to be an agency of the people, for the EPA to stand with the people and for the people in their moments of need, to fight for our rights to health by means of clean air, water, and soil. Let us move forward in a spirit of collaboration and allow the blessing of this unexpected, unified solidarity to protect our earth and to put life above greed for those who live here now and for the future generations who will inherit her. Together, we are stronger, and together, I believe that we will triumph. Petrochemical incidents occur once every 4 days, and vinyl chloride incidents every 5 days. It's not a matter of if another vinyl chloride incident will happen, but when. And this is foreseeable. We know that whether or not there is a recordable incident, these facilities pollute the air in the backyards where children across America play. Many of these pollutants are known carcinogens. But this pollution risk is not stationary. We also know there's significant risk for vinyl chloride incidents along any transportation route. And as Eve said, I will repeat this statistic. We know at any given moment, 36 million pounds of vinyl chloride is transported on more than 200 rail cars across nearly 2,000 miles of railways. It is well known that trains derail at a rate of 3 times a day. Take note. This is another predictable and foreseeable incident. What happened in East Palestine, Ohio, was 100% preventable. And we can prevent the next one from happening, but we need to take action and ban vinyl chloride. We cannot allow vinyl chloride to remain under the guise of industry progress and consumer need. Now is the time to unveil the dangers of this chemical that have conspicuously wreaked havoc for decades on more communities than mine. The US EPA has not only an opportunity, but an obligation to protect us from this persistent and harmful vinyl chloride pollution. The mayor of East Palestine, Ohio, echoed the President of the United States upon his visit to my community last month in saying that East Palestine will not be defined by the train derailment and chemical spill. I implore the EPA to acknowledge the request of the mayor and the president and to ensure East Palestine isn't forever known for a derailment and chemical spill, but rather for their unprecedented journey and accomplishments in becoming the catalyst for national change, the last straw that led to the finalization of banning vinyl chloride. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Next, I'd like to introduce Diane Wilson. Diane is the Executive Director and the Waterkeeper for San Antonio Bay Estuarine Waterkeeper. The Waterkeeper won a landmark Citizen Clean Water suit against Formosa Plastics in 2019 and settled with them for $50 million for environmental projects, zero discharge of plastic pellets, and powder from the facility cleanup, monitoring, and enforcement. This 2023 Goldman Environmental Award winner is a force, and we're so grateful that she could join us today to discuss this step toward protecting Americans from vinyl chloride. Diane?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that I'm a shrimp boat captain, and we're located on the mid-Texas Gulf Coast. I have been fighting Formosa Plastics, which is a PVC vinyl chloride plant, for the last 35 years. And in that time, I have probably talked to over 100 workers, whether they were exposed, whether they were injured, or whether they were whistleblowers. And many of the workers had worked at Formosa Plastics for 18 to 27 years. And they always told me of the unreported releases, the lies they made about releases of all this powder in PVC and vinyl chloride slurry. I had one worker who was with the PVC unit at Formosa, and he said that there were so many vinyl chloride releases in their unit in the control room, they had to turn the alarms off. And they were telling workers to go out there and try to put some of the earplugs into the holes to try to find them. There was one young lady, and apparently they didn't have leak detection very well, and she went around sniffing for the vinyl chloride leaks, and of course she died. And then I know this one worker, he brought me probably a stack of vinyl chloride monitoring of the leaks, probably 100 pages, and some of the releases were as much as 2,000 parts per million. I had another shift supervisor. He said he had been working at the plant for 25 years. He said he constantly lied for the company. When they had to have a big release, he said the supervisor, his boss, would come to him and say, well, how much is out there? And he'd say, I have no idea how much is out there. And he'd say, well, look at that spot. What is that? And he'd say, 1,000 pounds. And he'd say, go lower, until finally he said, tell me what you want me to put down. And that's what he said he did, because that's what you do out there. That's how you keep your job. And finally, probably one of the final things, because it caused him so much stress, is that there was like a 2 to 3 ton release of vinyl chloride slurry. It was all over the unit. It was all over the road. It was in the ditches. It was across the street. And he said, and they reported 2 pounds to the EPA. And he decided he couldn't do it anymore. And so we found a EPA criminal investigator. We brought him to this very neutral place so this worker could talk to this criminal investigator. And he had the reports. He was a witness, and the criminal investigator, he turned off the tape recorder and he said, if I am going to waste my time writing a report that is going nowhere, give me a dead worker. That's what he wanted. He says, this will go nowhere. And matter of fact, he turned to me and he said, you do it. You do it. You know, I'm a commercial fisherwoman. He's like, you take care of it. And so this was the type of results we got when we went to agencies, federal or state, or to officials in the community, or to the plant itself. So a lot of the workers were very concerned when, say, for instance, they started getting brain cancers. They would get knots on their head, and there was so much of a concern for brain cancer that even the upper management got wind of it. And so they sent these little memos to the vinyl chloride workers and said, not to worry, we're going to bring a study, we're going to bring a doctor in. And so they had a little meeting with all the vinyl chloride workers, and they brought in a study that was funded by the Vinyl Institute. And it said, not to worry, there is no connection between vinyl chloride and brain cancer. And matter of fact, it's probably the barbecue. It's the nitrates in the barbecue that you're eating. And so many of the workers, they realize that you can't go to the company. You will either lose your job or you will lose a bonus. So they would go to OSHA. So they would send all of these complaints to OSHA. They would say that the PVC powder, and this is vinyl chloride, the PVC powder was so thick you could not see your hand in front of you. And that I know when there were, one of the complaints was that there were 4 different shifts. There were about 10 workers, and they were bagging 1-ton bags of PVC powder. And on the bags of the 1-ton bags, it said vinyl chloride causes cancer. And these guys were covered in powder, PVC powder, and they had to go to Walmart to get their handkerchief to cover their face. They reported this multiple times to OSHA for a number of years. And then even when finally the EPA came in and did a little inspection in 2010, and what were the photographs? A worker covered in powder with a red handkerchief over his face. And right there was a 1-ton bag, vinyl chloride, cancer causing. I know one of the other instances, because there was such a concern because the powder, you know, a lot of people, they hear about the vinyl chloride emissions, but they don't realize that when there's workers in the plant and you're making PVC powder, it has these high levels of vinyl chloride in it. And it was the powder was so intense. The workers, there were 2 workers up on 14-foot scaffolding, and they were having to do some welding. They lit a spark and it exploded. And it like burnt their face, burnt their eyelids off. And, you know, again, this was constant warnings that was sent to OSHA. And then I know I even had, things got so bad, I even had upper management. It's not only the workers and the shift supervisors, I had upper management come. He wrote me a letter and he said he caught the plant manager or the soon-to-be plant manager, because Formosa has went through every time they have a problem with publicity or bad press, they get a new plant manager. Anyway, so this was the upcoming plant manager, and he was late at night in the administration building, and the shipping monitoring reports where they ship off PVC powder, and it was off spec, meaning they were ranging 12 to 32 parts per million when they should have been 2. And they were just changing those reports. So you wonder what's in those rubber duckies. It's more than probably what's standard. What's in the PVC pipe? It's probably a lot more than what's standard. The other thing is that, you know, I've talked a lot about workers, but where Formosa Plastic is the community of Point Comfort is across the street. It's across the street from them. So you've got a 2,500 acre chemical plant. You've got 3,000 workers, and everything that comes up, it goes to the community. And this started probably in 1983. In 1983, how you reported PVC powder, all of you, this was Texas Air Control Board. So in 1983, the Texas Air Control Board was getting letters and complaints from the community as saying, I have PVC powder all over my yards, in my swimming pools, on the cars, all over the house. Will you please stop Formosa? 1990, the same letters. Will you please stop the PVC powder that's all over our communities? It's in my swimming pool. We find it everywhere. And then finally, in 1994, 40 members of that community filed a complaint against Formosa for the callous disregard that they got from Formosa with these chemicals, with this vinyl chloride. And it was not only that they were callous and a disregard, but it was, some of it was downright sneaky and deviant over how they were trying to get past the community. So Formosa did. They bought out the community. They bought the homes. Formosa owns the homes. This elementary school that was there, there's no elementary school there. Formosa, it's where they train their workers now. And then the workers, I mean, there were ranchers, you know, in Texas, there's a lot of ranchers. So there were ranchers that had been there for 165 years, family, 6 generations, and there was Texas A&M Veterinary School did a study on the cattle downwind of Formosa's emissions, and they had DNA damage, and every one of the workers had been bought out. Formosa owns the whole thing. They are the largest landowner in Jackson County, 40,000 acres, and right now they're in the midst of an expansion. So, you know, the funny thing is that when I was looking at some of the data on the vinyl chloride, there was some of the releases. So I was just tagging down all of these releases that were happening at Point Comfort. The vinyl chloride monomer. I knew it was powder too, all over the place. And I copied 50 pages, and when it was talking about, 1 pound unknown amount, is like, I just started laughing to myself. I knew exactly what that was. It wasn't 1 pound. It was probably 1,000 pounds of vinyl chloride slurry or something going on. And so I just come back to that EPA criminal investigator who said, bring a dead worker. I'm bringing them dead workers. I'm testifying.
Diane, I just want to, we got to wrap it up. I'm sorry. I could listen to you all day, but we want to make sure that we have time for Q&A from reporters. Okay. Thank you so much for that.
Okay.
So I'm going to open the floor to questions. I just have a couple other introductions really quick. Jim